Hi everybody. Harry Platkow here with another Artist Corner here at Milford TV. We have a wonderful guest with us today, a new friend, and hopefully we'll be spending some time doing some shoots and stuff like that. Brent DeWitt of Milford is his name, and he's brought a wonderful series of photos. We're going to be talking to him about his philosophy of photography, the aesthetics of photography. There's so many things that we're going to be talking about today. So Brent, start off with this first one here.
Well, this first one was almost a gimme. A lot of these first photos, I've split the photos here into two groups. One is essentially places with less regard to people, and the second part is about street photography and people in general. Part of the problem of being a photographer and traveling is avoiding all the other tourists and all the other people who are taking photos at the same time. Mm-hmm. So a little bit here on these first ones is just being in the right place, because as I was just telling you a couple of minutes ago, when you and I started talking about this, I didn't want to do anything that said, you know, this is f8 120th of a second, blah, blah, blah. People can learn how to do that. This is more talking about seeing the picture that you want to take, mm-hmm. and taking it. And I'll use this as an excuse to trot out my prejudices / strong opinions. First is the old saying that says, the best camera to take a picture with is the one you have with you. Mm-hmm. And the advent of good cameras in cell phones has enabled and freed up so many millions of people who before didn't have a camera with them, and now they do.
Yeah. Harkening back to the old brownie days, everybody had a brownie back then.
Even better, because this one's probably in your pocket, and it was hard to put a brownie in your pocket. But and then secondly, something I feel very strongly about, there's no such thing as a point and shoot. Mm-hmm. Point and shoot is not a camera, it's an attitude.
That's fascinating.
And whether it's your camera phone, whether it's a high-end DSLR, mm-hmm. whether it's an 8x10 view camera that uses film, yeah. It's what you're envisioning it to do that makes a difference in the image.
You're an artist after all.
Yeah.
You're taking liberties.
I try to use the term enthusiast more than artist.
Oh, okay. But, all right. Well, you're being modest.
This first one is actually, it was taken up in Oregon, and it's the resolution isn't high enough to tell, but there's actually a sign at the top that says the old grist mill. Mm. The thing about this one is that thousands of people take pictures of this in any given summer. Mm-hmm. But they take it from a bridge that crosses a road, and they just line up across the bridge all the time. So a lot of times these photos are distinguished by the fact of what I'll call getting off the beaten track. Mm-hmm. Even if that getting off is only 8 feet down and off to the side, sure. Which is the case in this one. It's scrambled down a bank about 5 feet, off to the side of the bridge about 8 feet, and suddenly none of the tourists who were there that day were in the picture.
Oh, okay.
And it was possible to get a clean picture. This one's kind of unusual in that I post-process it to get the sepia just because I thought it looked great.
I never developed an eye for sepia. I just refused to go to that.
Yeah.
It's such a cliche, but you make it work. You captured the rustic feeling.
Yeah, really the mill itself sets the tone for what that picture came out. Yeah. If I were showing you the full color version, the mill wouldn't change color much.
Right.
Only the trees behind it.
Right.
So this is just kind of the first start at that. It was kind of a gimme, but again, it's emphasizing one of the things that I want to say is, don't take the picture from where all the tourists are standing. Mm-hmm. To start with, you'll probably get an elbow in your side, and secondly, you'll have to later play with some sort of photo editing and trying to knock out people and all this stuff. And admittedly, they sell lots of software for doing exactly that, but you don't want to do that.
Yeah.
We can move on to the next one.
Next one, Ryan. There, oh my.
This is another case of a different kind of positioning. This is in Florence, Italy, and that's the Duomo, which is the famous cathedral there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's tremendously heavily photographed by people from all over. But there was this wonderful statue. This is a statue of the Medicis, who were the sort of gangland family that ruled Florence in the earlier eras. And I thought the statue was just great. So basically, I scrambled around on a building next to the Duomo until I could get them both together. And like I say, again, I like the ability to combine images in the camera by the old saying of zooming with your feet. Also goes with composing with your feet,
Sure.
Rather than trying to do it in a program afterwards.
Well, good composition is like 99% of the battle, right?
I think so. And to that extent, in my photography, I'm probably a better editor than I am a photographer.
Really?
In that I seldom take a picture that I don't end up doing little crops and tweaks to until everything kind of falls into the frame where I like it. And again, this is a lot about travel photography, which is kind of where this whole thing started when you and I were talking originally. But as I was telling you earlier, I don't so much travel as a photographer. I travel to see and taste and experience the different places I go. And the fact is, I do have a camera with me, and I end up taking a bunch of images at the same time, a few of which are worth keeping.
So, do you have a camera in your car?
No.
You don't, okay.
No, that's what my cell phone's for.
Oh my.
I ran a photo club for a little while, and we had people bringing in images. And at one particular session, we probably had 10, 15 images. And this one young lady brought in the most stunning image of the ducks sculpture up at the Frog Pond in Boston.
Okay.
In the snow. It was just beautiful. Composition, exposure, everything. She had taken it with her iPhone. And it was the best photo we saw that day. So it again, best camera to take a picture with is the one you have with you.
Roger. Next one. Yeah.
This one was taken in Rome, and it was right around the corner from the apartment, sort of an Airbnb sort of thing before Airbnb was popular, that we stayed in. And one day I was just walking by this and just looked at all the color. And this does not have the saturation tweaked up on it. These were the actual colors on the street. And it just impressed me. And the thing that made this one a little bit difficult is this was actually a fairly busy walkway.
Yeah.
And I was plastered against the wall on the opposite side of the street because it was a narrow street.
Yeah.
So again, sometimes you have to kind of wait your time and, like I say, plaster yourself against something, which can sometimes help because then you don't have any camera shake. You're your own tripod. But never ignore the mundane when you're traveling. A lot of times what we pass by is a very interesting photo, and people can have their own judgment, but I think this is a fairly interesting photo.
I knew it
because
was
of all the
Italy.
things going on.
I knew it was Italy as soon as I saw it. You didn't have to say anything. That's Italy.
Italy's a colorful country. Next.
And you spent a lot of time over there too, right?
We've done a couple of week-long, 2-week-long sessions in Florence and Rome.
Yeah.
Usually getting a place to stay there and then doing excursions out
Right.
from the city, taking buses. I like to avoid driving cars on vacation as much as possible, simply because a lot of the places we go have good transportation systems.
Right.
And we do some touring. We take some pre-programmed bus tours and such, which can be helpful if it's a country where you don't have the foggiest notion of the language. And I think that's also something worth noting is, we'll get into it more when we have people lately, but being able to have a half a dozen words in the native language can go a long way towards making people see you as a friendly person, not a photographer who's looking to exploit them.
And you can also start a war with 6 words.
I've never actually done that yet, but who knows?
Yeah.
I'll have a photo at the end that shows closest I've come to that.
Yes, right. Next one. This looks like an infrared photo. Is it infrared?
It does look like an infrared photo, and it's not. This was taken late at night. This is actually just outside the little place it's actually in the shadow on the left, that again was very, very busy during the day. So this was shot at 11 o'clock at night. And so there were some exposure challenges.
Was it available light, or were there? No, there was a
That's
street
available
light.
Available. There were a number of street lights along the corridor, and this one was taken to black and white after the fact.
Okay.
Because I just loved the way the city looked in the grays of the evening.
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure that the fact that it was evening came through, and that those were. And again, midday, mid-tourist crowd is possibly the hardest possible time for a photographer to get a decent photo as a tourist. And I'm kind of using the term tourist and photographer loosely, but I knew that the buildings were interesting, but I knew that the people walking up and down this rather busy corridor weren't, so wait. And
well, to get technical, did you use a tripod for that?
Yes, I almost certainly, probably not a tripod. I have a monopod that I use a lot. It's a walking stick.
Roger.
And I use it as a walking stick, but it has a camera mount on top.
Oh, cool.
And I highly recommend those. Most of the museums in Europe and actually a lot of countries, even the US actually, don't allow you to use a tripod in the gallery. For the most part, because they don't want people tripping over it if suddenly somebody yells fire and you have to get out of there.
Roger.
I have been able to get away with the monopod, with the mag mount on top, because it looks like a walking stick and it doesn't get in other people's way.
There you go.
And it does help when you need that little bit of extra steadiness in taking your photo. So I never travel without my trusty monopod.
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, I'll give you the details later, but I've been traveling with that for almost 20 years.
Yeah.
Next.
Next one, Ryan?
This one is, again, taken at odd times to avoid the crowd. This is Ponte Vecchio in Florence, Italy, otherwise known as the Avenue of the Goldsmiths. It was originally a tannery. It spans the river there, and it was originally a tannery, and people started complaining about the smells of the tannery. So I forget which of the I forget who did it, but one of the major rulers there said, now we're going to have only gold and silversmiths here. And these shops are, in general, actually built out over the river. The bridge spans it. And it's a wonderful piece. And this was taken at almost 11 o'clock at night. And you can see there's still plenty of traffic. And this one definitely required a monopod and bracing it. One of the reasons it's close to the wall is because I'm leaning against the wall. And you can see that then in the motion blur of the people that are going by. But I actually like that, and you get the star effect from shooting all those lights and such. And there's a certain richness at night that the bright light of day will take away from you. So, you know, if anything about this series of photos that I want to kind of hammer home is go out at night. If a lot of these cities are not very threatening. They're friendly. Obviously, you don't want to get yourself in the wrong place, so you kind of want to survey it while you can ask the locals of where shouldn't I go versus where can I go.
As somebody who is well-traveled as you, did you ever go behind the Iron Curtain when it existed?
No, I didn't. That was early on,
Yeah.
and did not have a chance to do that.
Yeah.
So again, this is an exercise in late night photography, and reserve an hour or two at night. You can sleep the next morning to go out and take your photos.
Nice to be retired.
No, these were actually.
You were working?
Well, this was a vacation.
Yeah.
This was a week and a half vacation.
All right, let's go to the next one.
This one is one of my best examples of don't take the picture from where they expect you to take the picture from. This is Gibraltar, taken on Christmas Day. The backstory is a little strange in that this was actually on a tour of Spain, and they had promised us that we'd get to see Gibraltar and go up the rock and see the old emplacements, because there's hundreds of miles of bored out emplacements, gun emplacements, and strategic back from World War II inside the mountain. And there's a tourist platform off to the right about 10, 15 feet. And it's up, and the tourists dutifully walk up the little board sidewalk and stand there and take pictures of the Rock of Gibraltar. And I said, well, that's not much fun. And there were all these wonderful little dune plants that were growing along there. And believe it or not, this photo has not been taken to black and white. This is what it came out at. It was it was a completely overcast, dull day. You can see a little bit on the side there, the fog obscuring it. It was very overcast, very dim. And then they found out that, well, it's Christmas Day, so everything's closed. You can't go up the mountain. So we had to, we settled for taking these shots down below. But this again is sort of one of those things that you'll hear photographers talk about a lot, which is having your foreground as kind of a frame for your background.
Yep.
And that's the case here. What I consider to be fairly interesting dune plants provided, and I was probably about a foot off the ground when I took this. You couldn't take this picture standing up. Which
I
is
had never seen that of Gibraltar. That side of Gibraltar is totally new to me. And you did capture the essence with all the vegetation up in front. It looks wonderful.
You know, it's again the other half of that thing I said about, you know, taking, being off the beaten track. If you don't want to take the same picture everybody else has taken, don't take it from eye level.
Or don't use a 50mm lens either.
There are arguments for 50mm lenses, but I tend to use a lot of different focal lengths depending on what I'm trying to get. But you know, don't be scared to kneel down, hold the camera low. I'm lucky my camera has a flip-out view screen, so I can actually flip it up, hold the camera 6 inches off the ground, and still see what I'm taking a picture of without actually having to lay on my belly in the mud. But again, don't always think eye level, and don't be where all the other tourists are being, because this was not very far away. This was 10 feet away from where the platform was. Okay.
Next one. I like that.
This is how to edit to your advantage. This is Machu Picchu. That is Machu Picchu, the rock in the background, and the ruins on the left in Peru. The day we were up there, it was rainy, misty, and all, and they were handing out, I shouldn't say handing out, selling cheaply these neon-colored ponchos of cheap throwaway plastic to all of the tourists. And if you kind of stare at them, you see all those tourists that seem to be like little Christmas trees around. And they were like fluorescent green, bright blue, fluorescent yellow, bright red. And there was simply no way to take a picture without people in it. It's one of the times I envy true professionals who can pay to get before the place opens and after the place closes. Most of us as mere civilians don't get that privilege. So this was very distracting when I first looked at the photo. And the way to get rid of it was to render it in black and white. And I never take a picture in black and white when I'm traveling. Because if I take a picture in black and white and I want the color, I can't get it back. If I take a picture in color and I think it's going to work better in black and white like this one, I can always do that after the fact. The most fundamental editing programs will let you take it to black and white. So it gives you something to work with, and it gives you that richness that you can use later in your creative process to decide what you want the final image that people are going to see to be.
Exactly.
So all those little blobs of white used to be bright fluorescent colors, and they're less distracting. Your eye does tend to pull more towards the lights, which is natural in the way you look at a photo. The bright tends to pull your eye first, so that big rock in the back, which is Machu Picchu, actually draws your eye there and then pulls you down and off to the left where you see the structure in the old ruins.
Next one.
Now we're on to our people section of this. I love taking pictures of people in especially foreign countries. It's kind of interesting. I generally find it easier to take pictures of people in foreign countries than I do in the US.
Why?
Sometimes they're more friendly. And in a lot of cases, I'm not really taking random I'm taking pictures like this. This and the next few are of shopkeepers. And again, this is a late night photo. I went out, we were staying in a small apartment just down the street, and there was this row of essentially an old-fashioned strip mall, except it was 200-year-old strip mall. And one of the shops, the next two shops were actually along there. And by the time you got to 8, 9 o'clock at night, not a lot of the folks were shopping there. So these guys were happy to mug for the camera and very friendly. And I think I bought some potato chips or peanuts or something there too. And most of the time, I don't take candid photos very often. I'll show them the camera saying, okay, sort of thing. It's a good word to learn in a language, which is photograph. Fortunately, it's photograph in a lot of languages. But yeah, he was quite happy to mug for the photo. And
cool.
The next one after this, go ahead and go to the next. Same sort of thing. Pizza house, late at night. This guy was, bored. So he was happy to be friendly and mug for the shot. I think I took about 5 shots of him. I like this one the best. But again, very friendly people. People who, when you present yourself, not as demanding, but just as somebody who kind of wanders in and is happy. And you want to, the more you can engage the people, rather than walking in and just starting to take pictures, the more likely you are to get the happy side of a person. And this guy was definitely happy.
Next one.
This one was taken in Guatemala. A little shop on the side. No, I lied. This is in Peru. And this lady just had her little shop for all the tourists wandering along this little roadway. And again, all it took was showing her the camera, smiling, and all that, and she just broke out into this big grin and all.
Wow.
A lot of the countries I've been to, the people are, especially if people are exposed to tourists, they tend to be fairly nonchalant, but once you engage them as a person and show them you have some interest in them, that's when you get this kind of a smile breaking out.
Right.
She was probably totally deadpan before I started having a sort of pantomime conversation with her. And it works. I've had great luck in Thailand, in Peru, in Guatemala, in Italy.
How do you get them to sign a release, though?
I don't.
No.
But then, you know, I haven't published any of these photos, so it doesn't matter.
Right.
You don't need a release for any photo that you're not going to publish.
Sure.
And for that matter, a lot of these people, some of these, especially the ones later of street artists, they're street artists. If you take a picture of a street artist, you don't need a release. They're performing in public.
Right.
It's dubious whether or not this is public performance and she's smiling, but I don't think it is.
No, I don't think so.
Next. This was also in Peru, a little roadside stop where we were on a bus tour, and it stopped at a few places. Usually the bus tours stop at some place where the bus driver makes money by letting off his charges there to buy things. Some tour companies are worse about that than others. But there's this little girl there selling these finger puppets, her and her brother, and her mom's in the back there keeping a watchful eye over them. And sometimes it's just, you know, that is just perfect, the expression, you know. And so I bought a puppet from her.
Cool.
And she was just so cute, you know. You couldn't resist making the photo and getting the mom in the back and getting. Again, this is kind of, and obviously I was not shooting from eye level. You know, I'm 6'1", 6'2". This kid was about, you know, this tall. But I took the picture more from her level, shooting up, and I think it humanizes her more than when you're, you know, this tall person shooting down. You don't get that kind of expression, and you don't get
That's right.
the personality. And that's I think when I'm shooting people, taking photographs of people in anywhere, I'm trying to get their personality more than anything else. And sometimes you don't get that on the first shot. Sometimes shooting in burst mode, where you're taking 4 or 5 photos as fast as your camera will take them, if the people are moving or talking, is a great way to throw away 4 and keep the one that you got where the person's eyes were open.
Sure.
And it's a nice trick that you can do with electronic cameras that was hard to do with inexpensive film cameras before, because they couldn't advance the film fast enough.
Yeah.
Next. This is her brother, I think. At least they both seem to respond to the same mother in the store. He obviously had a different attitude about selling than the first one did. And this is actually our tour bus that he's leaning up against. And I think the combination of I had tipped him actually to stay still for a minute so I could take his picture. He's selling the same finger puppets. But that was just such a colorful combination between the greens and the blues and the reds, and that attitude. It was just like, okay, you can take my picture. I thought it was just a great pose and a great attitude and a great kid. That it's one of my favorite photos from the whole trip in Peru.
Cool. Next one. A mime.
Now we're into street performers.
Yeah.
A mime, a very animated mime. This was in Rome, street performer in Rome, and she would mug for you forever. Threw a tip in her tip jar, and I've got a great picture of her hugging my wife. And I'm not sure that my wife was as enthusiastic as the mime, but she did laugh. And I must have 15 photos of her, all of which are just these wonderful expressions and such. And this one, I think the reason I included it in this was it's one of those up close and personal. There are a couple more here to follow, but standing back from a person 15 feet and using a telephoto lens to try to take their picture does a number of things. It doesn't establish connection with the person, which if you're trying to get an expression like that out of them, square on facing you, you've got to establish that kind of a contact and such, which you're not going to do by trying to take a picture from 15 feet away. Second, and this is, I didn't want to get into the technicalities of taking photos, but telephotos, the further away you are, the more it flattens the person's expression. The closer you in are with a wider lens, the more every little crag and nook of their face becomes obvious. If you photograph someone with a wide-angle lens up close, you will see every pore on the skin of their face. If you take that same photo with a 100mm or a long lens from 6 feet away, their face is flattened and it's generally a lot more photogenic, which is why people typically use long lenses for doing portrait work.
I never realized that, but what you said is true. Long lenses for portrait work, you know, it's the way to go.
I didn't want to flatten this woman's face, so I got up close and I think this was, I think I was probably using a kit zoom on this, and you know, got in close, and she was obviously so friendly. I had no problem getting in close and getting a good close-up photo, and it pays off. You get a very expressive photo.
Cool. Next one?
This one, he was not so expressive. This was one of those mimes who, I guess I don't think you call him a mime. I'm not sure what you call him. One of these people who stay stock still for 15, 20 minutes at a time, like a statue. And he paints himself up like a statue, all in one color, and would stand that way for 15 minutes and then move to a new pose. And I think a lot of us have seen people do this on the street before. And I actually didn't have to establish much rapport for him because he wouldn't move. So I was free to kind of get in and get a good picture that it showed all the little wrinkles and the human parts of him. Although he does a remarkable job of makeup and the costume and all to make him look almost like a statue.
Sure.
This was again on the street.
Next one?
This one was in Thailand. And this was a posed sort of thing. The tour took you to a hill people village, and the people there made a good deal of their daily bread by putting on brightly colored costumes that they probably wouldn't wear to work, and putting on shows for the tourists. And I just loved this woman's face, and combine that with her head. This was again establish rapport, get in close. I probably took this photo from, well, maybe 3 feet away. But again, it's not, you can't stand back and really capture the depth, her eyes and the wrinkles. If you tried to take that from 10 feet away, it wouldn't be the same photo.
Yeah.
So again, I can't say get to know your people, but get in the people's confidence. Make them feel that you're a warm person and that they can be a warm person, that you're not being this callous photographer who's just out to get the image. Next. This was the same village, and one of the reasons I like this is both the two young performers, and that's one of our tour group in the back. And to be honest, I hate to use this phrase, but it's sort of the ugly American sort of thing. This young, very, I won't say innocent, but open young kid that's all dressed up for the show, and the very impatient American, in this case, with the sunglasses sitting in the back like, well, when are you going to get this over with? But I thought it ended up being a great image to sort of juxtapose those two.
It is a good shot.
But the youngsters were great. There were probably 30 of them there. They did dancing and such. But yeah, he's holding that basket you see at the bottom is of trinkets he's selling.
Roger.
And a lot of times I don't buy the trinkets, but I give them, the equivalent of 50 cents or $1 American that would take to buy one,
Yeah.
and then let them keep it.
Sure.
And in turn, hold up my camera and say, okay, and so the kid was, I shouldn't use the word kid, I overuse that word. The young fella sat there and very patiently let me take his picture.
Next one.
Street performers. This was in Bangkok, in the street market there, where there were just stalls after stalls after stalls. This one was particularly interesting because he was playing bluegrass banjo, and as a previous bluegrass banjo player and myself, I was just fascinated by the whole thing. And the shopkeeper is the lady in the back, and she was just rocking out. And the guy with the sunglasses is just great. I love the flag shirt and the sunglasses and the aviator glasses and all, and the Washburn banjo, which is a good quality banjo. He was just sitting there playing for the folks coming by, mostly to lure folks into her shop to buy leather goods and such. And the guy on the left is kind of keeping his eye on me. He's not quite sure about the photographer, I think, but again, this was essentially a street performer who wasn't out in the street. He was, sort of a part of the shop, and it was. You get a lot of that, especially in bazaars and in big street markets like this one in Bangkok, that you see a lot of shops like this.
Next one.
This was also in Thailand, but these are Royal Guards in Bangkok, and they don't move. Same thing that you see in England or at Buckingham Palace or anything. They stand immobile for long periods of time, and they don't seem to be bothered by you sort of getting up close and personal and taking photos. So it's a great opportunity for you to decide what you want the composure to be.
Sure.
And this is one of those exceptions where I actually did take it from probably my standing height, maybe just slightly crotch down. But again, it's the expression of the people and getting a little bit closer. I mean, this isn't clearly in their face because I wanted both of them in the photo, but trying to get a bit of a feel for what they represent. Next. And this one. This is what happens. This is not particularly a good photo. I included this is the last of the group, as what you do when you don't get the right rapport with the people. This is in the Grand Bazaar in Marrakesh. And they warn you ahead of time about not taking unsolicited photos of the shopkeepers in the bazaar. And I didn't think I was doing that. I thought I was taking pictures of these hanging shoes. But the shopkeeper who owned the shoes took issue with that. And what you're seeing there is a shoe in mid-flight towards my chest, expressing his displeasure for me taking the photo. So that's how not to do it.
You got a great shot out of it.
Yeah, and actually it was purely accidental. I was taking the picture of the shoe at exactly the same time that the shoe hit me in the chest. Didn't hurt or anything, but certainly gave me a reason to move on. So establish that rapport. Don't do what I did in this photo of thinking you're taking a picture when there's actually somebody in the picture who doesn't want their photo taken. And so that's the ones I brought today.
How much more time do we have? You have a clock in here? wrap it up?
Okay.
Okay.
We can edit.
Yeah. Brent, with all the photos that you brought in today, I'm thinking to myself, you must have a zillion cameras of all different focal lengths, all different modes. What is the camera that you use of preference? Is there one? I suspect there are more.
Well, I kind of said that at the first. It's the one I've got with me. I sold a 4x5 film view camera 25 years ago to buy my first digital camera.
Oh.
And I've gone through maybe, not a lot, I've probably gone through 4 cameras, 5 cameras since then. I still have the 35 millimeter camera I bought when I was in college for film. I have a couple of film cameras.
Do you ever use them?
Not often.
No. Did you spend a lot of darkroom time when you had film cameras?
That was actually, yes. Especially back in the olden days when I was a poor student and shot black and white a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Shooting black and white, I don't think you can really shoot black and white without having a dark room to control the whole process through. Color and slide and print photography, less so, because you can hold the photo up and say, yeah, that looks like what I took. That's what Harry looked like. Can't do that with black and white. You and I were talking earlier about the differences in old films and how they responded to color differently.
Yep.
We live in such an empowering age for photographers, whether they be using their cell phone, whether they be using, like I use, a mirrorless small camera versus a large DSLR. All of them can take great pictures.
Mm-hmm.
I like the smaller camera because it's less intimidating. The current camera I use does have interchangeable lenses. I do have choose different lenses for different scenarios when I'm going out. Usually I don't carry a lot of lenses with me, but I'll pick a lens when I'm going out.
Roger.
But again, not to discount everybody out there who's got a camera in their pocket. First thing is, use it. You'll never regret deleting an electronic photo, but you may well regret not taking the photo that you could have taken because you had the camera in your pocket.
On those words, Brent, I think we're going to say goodbye. You pretty much summed it all up.
Thank you very much, Harry.
My pleasure. Thanks, everybody. You've been watching The Artist Corner. We'll see you in a month sometime. Be well. Bye-bye.